Everyone's favourite accounting software. What a great intro. So Lonely Planet's first iOS application was the entire San Francisco guidebook, not indexed on the iPhone screen. So you just like the book, you're just flipping pages as fast as you can to get to like page 332 before you get to the bars in San Francisco. Really, really odd. So I had the pleasure of working with Nigel from across the pond. He was here in Melbourne most of the time and I was over in San Francisco. I'm going to kind of break tonight up in three ways. The first is young, dumb and very ambitious. The second is the entrepreneur, and the third chapter of my career, which I'm going through right now, I call rehab. So first and foremost, it was an interesting time. I moved back from Japan, I think this is about 2000, and I'd had a glorious time over there. So living with a couple of Australian lads and teaching English for a company called Nova, which they later revealed was actually run by the Yakuza, so that was quite interesting. But when I got back, I did the strangest master's degree. I hope none of you are doing it in here. So it was the Masters of Tourism at Monash University. And I think what had happened was I'd got myself into this weird mode where I thought, well, I was a good traveller. That's I was good at that. I'll study that. Now, throughout that journey, I couldn't quite come to terms with the decision I'd made. And what was funny about it was highly theoretical. So they were talking about the analysis of backpackers and the impact on economies all over the world, the study of up-and-coming tourism regions and how we can learn to market them better, social consciousness in the traveller community and all those sorts of things. Now, what was really interesting was I applied for every possible job I could that was not in the travel industry. It's very strange. But one of the most amazing memories of that time was I sat on a panel interview and there were three guys. I didn't know the other two for a bar of soap. I certainly knew myself. And they asked a really interesting question. They said, what is the most interesting thing you have done in the last year? And the guy to my left, I think he said something like, I averaged an HD. I thought, that's pretty bloody good, isn't it? It's really interesting. And another one, the other guy gave a similar type response. And the interviewer looked over at me, and this was at GE. Does anyone here work for GE here? No? So this is at GE, and she looked at me and she said, Blake, what's the most interesting thing you've done in the last year? And I said, well, I climbed Mount Fuji during the night. And it actually wasn't that interesting, but it was a bloody lot more interesting than the other two stories. And she looked at me and said, tell us all more. And I had the stage for about 15 minutes. And I thought, this is absolutely brilliant. This is not about how well I did at university. It comes back to me being a great traveller. And what's really amazing about that little life experience was now, in every interview I have with anyone, not myself, it's when I'm interviewing for my team at Xero or elsewhere, I'll ask them for the most interesting thing they have done in the last year. And you get some really, really interesting responses. So I didn't get that job. But strangely enough, and partly because I was doing a Masters of Tourism, Lonely Planet came calling, and I ended up as a business development associate, which was essentially licensing our content in digital form to websites all over the world and allowing them to do weird and wonderful things with it. So that meant providing Yahoo Travel with 230 digitised travel guides and charging them a fortune to do it. It meant, strangely, talking to people like MySpace around giving Lonely Planet authors a voice in the social world. Leads me to my next story. So there I am. Judy Slatcher was the CEO of Lonely Planet. She says, Blake, you need to go over to Fox Interactive Media in LA and you need to have a chat to MySpace. Now, Tom, remember Tom, everyone's first friend? Remember him? So Tom had just cleaned up, I think, $326 million from the very clever Rupert. And this was awesome. So I was really young and I'm getting asked to rock down to LA and go and meet Tom. Now I'm talking to Tom and he's crapping on, not that clever, but clearly successful. And I hear this sort of wheelie noise underneath his desk. So Tom has a skateboard on his feet and he is literally sitting there as I'm chatting to him. He's going like this. And so at that point in time, I became absolutely fascinated with startups. And so I sought about extricating myself from Lonely Planet and ending up in startup world. So I joined a company which had pitched to myself and the CEO at Lonely Planet and basically was on a journey to disaggregate the, I won't use disrupt, disaggregate the entire travel industry. So the company was called Nile Guide. We raised $15 million off a piece of paper. You can't do that in Australia. I'll tell you about that story in a minute. So we raised a lot of cash and had 15 staff. And boy, oh boy, were we paying through the nose for developers. And their view was, let's just go and get the best of the best from the best companies in the valley. So we did as such. And the whole concept was quite simply aggregate the world's best content sources, enable people to sort through those content sources in a very nifty way, bring those content sources into an environment where you could organise them by itinerary, and then finally spit it out to an iPhone guide. Now here's the amazing thing. It worked really, really well. But we couldn't articulate the problem well enough to get people to use the technology. So we had millions upon millions of people coming into these pages, consuming a piece of content as granular as romantic French restaurant in Richmond, Union Dining, and taking that piece of content away with them and doing exactly the thing we were trying to get them not to do, which was visit another 25 websites before they fulfilled their entire travel journey. And we couldn't quite get the technology front and centre enough. And when I finally reflect on that, it's funny, it's actually what Xero has been able to solve for accounting. The user experience that we'd given these travellers all over the world, it actually wasn't beautiful enough. We just had crap loads of content that they could consume, move on and consume again without us getting any clip of the ticket along the journey. So Nile Guide used its 14 million or 15 million at about $500,000 a month in burn. And I decided to move on from there after about 2 years and decided, with the support of the founders actually, to come home and start my own business. So what did I start? Has anyone, most of you have been to the US, so Daily Candy, Urban Daddy, Thrill List and many like at the time were making lots and lots of money from daily email magazines. Simply one single piece of content delivered Monday to Friday to the delights of lifestyle-orientated customers. I thought I could do that here with a grand vision of turning it into a commerce engine. So there's a few lessons here, first of which I probably went about it the wrong way. So I had this empire-building ambition. Now, when you go and reflect on all these companies, including Xero, the founders typically don't set out and say, I am creating an empire. They typically set out and they solve a problem in an incredibly niche area, and often a very niche geography, i.e. Facebook, Harvard. So I didn't do that. I decided to hire writers all over Australia. So from day one, Melbourne, Sydney, Perth and Brisbane, producing content on a daily basis and sending it out. Now we did okay. We had about 60,000 subscribers by the time I flipped it into a commerce engine. At which point a really interesting thing happened. We were selling high-end or discerning experiences, if you will, in the same way that Groupon was selling shit. And we were doing that for about 6 weeks prior to Groupon landing in Australia, and Spreets and Zoupon and Boupon and whatever else you want to say. I think the record, there was about 55 of them at the time. And the media was all talking about these companies, and I thought, wow, this is great. I'm going to get talked about here. We're going to be in the Age, we're going to be in the Herald Sun, we'll pick up a whole heap of customers and we'll start selling a lot more. No one would talk about us. We weren't from the US, we didn't come with lots of money, we were a 3-person team, we were struggling, and the story was quite simply not good enough. But here's what I did. I thought I could trick them into writing about us. I created a fake PR company called Secret Squirrel PR. It was deliberately meant to be corny. I renamed myself Jude Smith. This is no shit. And I created a Facebook page called Secret Dining Society. I wrote a press release and I sent it to all the same journalists and writers who had refused to write about our company. So here I am, I'm outside Fairfax and I'm going to walk in there to pitch for capital. And a gentleman rings and he says, "This is so-and-so from The Age. Is this Jude Smith?" I'm like, holy shit. It's actually not. But, yeah, this is Jude. And he says, "Oh, look, can you tell me a little bit about Secret Dining Society? We think it's a fantastic story. Tell me about how it all happened." Now, I wasn't ready for this, so I just told my own story. So I said, "Oh, well, I was in San Francisco and New York and they had Secret Dining Society clubs everywhere and I've decided to do it here." And he said, "And so how are you going about doing it?" And I said, "Well," I didn't know any of this, by the way. So I said, "Well, look, what I've done is I've set up a Facebook page and people can register their interest, and I've engaged George Columbaris to put on a secret dinner." Now, this is an entrepreneur who is absolutely sweating in his boots, right? Tight for money, and all I want is attention. So he asks a few more questions. We get over that. I'm thinking, holy crap, this is going to be really interesting. So I ring the team down in Melbourne, and I'm like, "Okay, so you know that PR contact who knows George? Yep. Get him on the phone now." And so he absolutely loved it. He absolutely loved it. So next thing I know, I'm invited down to a photo shoot at the press club with George Columbaris. But I can't turn up. It wasn't Blake, it was bloody Jude Smith who was meant to be there. So I said, "Look, it's so secret. You're going to have to take a photo of George, write the article, and just reference Jude Smith. And people will love it, I'm telling them." So they did. Now, the Herald Sun did too. Broadsheet did as well, which was our competitor. Sorry if there's anyone from Broadsheet, but I thought that was really funny. 3,000 did, and there was another Daily ML magazine at the time called Daily Addict. They did too. We picked up about 8,000 members to that Facebook page and we put it to ballot. And people paid $155 to sit with George Columbaris over a 5-course meal at the press club. And I told him, "You're not allowed to cook. I want you to sit there and talk with the guests." And he did. And now this is when MasterChef was maybe 1 or 2 seasons in. So people are loving this. The most successful element of my business, which took on about 6 iterations. And when I say success, I'm not meaning by money, by financial rewards, but engagement with the end customer, was this membership to Secret Dining Society. It went for 3 years. It was on every 2 months. It was a subscription commerce website where people would pay $145, discounted by 10 from the prior one, $145, and they would turn up to a secret location, which was quite simply a top restaurant around Melbourne and Sydney, and enjoy dinner with the chef alongside 60, 70, 80 others. And it was awesome. So we went on to use that community that we'd built through Secret Dining Society to create a subscription commerce marketplace for specialty food, like Etsy, but in the food context. So for anyone who could not sell through Coles and Safeway or anyone else of that ilk, they would have a marketplace where they could list their products and ultimately sell. And it went okay. But what does okay mean? Okay means that we had 200 merchants selling digitally to about 1,000 customers. Now, I bet you, in fact, I know this, if I took that traction to San Francisco and turned up to a VC or an angel and said, I've got 200 merchants, we are a 3-man team sitting in a shithouse office in Fitzroy. You should have seen this office. We have customers who are heavily engaged and they are buying product on a subscription basis. They are getting their favourite coffee delivered from St. Ali. They are getting meats delivered from Bertie's Butcher. And this thing is going off. I almost guarantee you I would have raised capital. We could not entice an investor in Australia to touch this. And the most common question was, can you point me to an example in the US of someone who has done this? There's now about 15 all hitting each other head on in the US.